Okay, so welcome everyone. The goal of this presentation is to point to some important aspects of journal writing in math education, actually journal writing for results of your PhD thesis. My motivation stems from years of trying to help individual people with writing the papers, and I can see that people make the same mistakes. And of course, they are new people, so they think it's new mistakes, but for me, it's old mistakes. So I was trying to first, I thought that I will make my own presentation about individual parts of journal article. But then I realized actually that all of you should know one, one work, and that is this. And I don't know who have seen it, but this is the Compendium for Early Career Researchers, mainly for PhD students. You can find the link on our website for PhD students. And it includes a lot of useful information, including very nice information at several places regarding writing a journal article. And journal article actually has the same parts as your thesis writing or your conference presentation. Everything has the same rules, but different scope. One is longer, one is shorter, one is the shortest. But otherwise, it is the same. I sent you, but only on Friday, so I don't know whether you had an opportunity to look at it. I sent you two links to articles in Educational Studies in Mathematics. You know that it's one of the best journals in our area. And I wanted you to look at it, not from the point of view of all the content, but only from the point of view of the structure of these journal articles. What is inside? As you know, I am also an editor in Scientia and Educazione, our distinguished journal where you should all publish. But also I am a reviewer for Educational Studies in Mathematics and other journals. And if you make the mistakes about which we are going to speak, you will not even get to the review process. They will look at it and they will say, no, you're not allowed to even submit to our journal. Even though the information is there somewhere, it's not at the place that this information about your research is expected. So for example, in one of the journal articles which was submitted to Scientia Educazione in recent days, the data analysis and the results was merged into one section. So this is unacceptable, so you can't do that. Your article is going to be returned. So in my presentation, I will show you what you can actually find inside this compendium at different places. And I will just comment on it from my own experience. And of course, we can discuss it later if you think so. So this is from page 351, and it tries to say what you should do if you write an article. So of course, you will have to first find what you want to write about. And this is not your thesis. You are not writing about your thesis. You are not writing about everything in your thesis. You are trying to find one focus which is narrow enough to be put into an article. So you are not trying to shorten your thesis to a journal article. So then you decide on a publication venue. For example, Scientia and Educazione is a good outlet for your first attempts, actually. Then you think through the structure of the paper, and we are going to speak about it in more detail. And it's good to start already with the structure. So you will make the structure, and then you will put some things here, and you try to augment somehow. You write a first draft, and then you know it from my course of Math Education 1 that I always want you to supply evidence. If you claim something, it must be justified somehow. If you have some journal articles which they can support it, well enough. But you can also have some evidence from data around you, or you can argue by a logical argument. but be careful about what is possible to be a logical argument. And of course, sometimes you can also argue from your own experience, but it shouldn't be the main part of your justifications. Then, of course, you must check for fluency and things like that. It's clear. But this is important. They write it specifically for you. You write a draft, and even before submitting to your supervisor, you should first leave it several days, read it again, because you will read it as a new proposal. Suddenly you will find things which you wouldn't be able to see if you hadn't had these several days of time frame. And of course, if you find some colleagues to read, but there are your supervisors, of course, they are always willing to read your papers. But of course, if you have a colleague, a PhD colleague who can read it, it's also good. Because if someone else reads it, you can suddenly see what assumptions you have made, which are not written there, because you think it's logical, it's clear, but it's not. And the reviewer is going to be reading your paper without any other context. So you must provide all the information. So what are the components of a well-structured research paper? There is a chapter by Liljedahl, I don't know how it is pronounced, but he is the editor, or he was at the writing of this chapter, an editor of one of the distinguished journals. And in his chapters, he really provides very good tips. So we can see what each paper about empirical research should look like. So here with the title and abstract, that's clear. There are some rules for that as well. There is introduction, and you can see that this is broad and narrowing and then broadening again. And this is described on the right, so you can read it in more detail later. So at the beginning, you start from the broader issues. So you can say something more general about education in your country. So what is the source of your problem? But then, already in the introduction, you must narrow a little bit. And then the literature review again starts from the most broad issues, going to the narrow problem which you are going to solve. That is why it ends with research questions. And this is one of the problems I very often see in manuscripts, is that the research questions are already put at the end of the introduction. It shouldn't be so, because research questions should stem from the theoretical section, from your literature review. So you start with broader overview. Chandresa would be saying, my goal is to prepare intervention which would help pupils learn mathematics. Sorry, not to learn, but to solve mathematics word problem. But then after reading all the literature, she would say, and we could see that two important aspects of such interventions are development of metacognition and visualizations. So in my research question, I will focus on these two. And while then you are focused, so that's why all your own research is very narrow. It speaks about your data, about your results. But then comes discussion and conclusion, and it widens again. So you are trying to put your results among results of other people. So you start broadly, and then at the end you broaden the work again. And as he says here, the same framework works for your thesis. It works for a short conference paper as well. Then there's a chapter by Presnak and Kilpatrick, and they say what the editors, if the article comes to the editor, first he or she looks at these things. So there's a well-written abstract. The abstract is very important, and the abstract is really about, this is my research question, this is my goal, these are my data, these are my results, and this is what it means. So even in the abstract, you must clearly say what is new in your results and how it fits within the broader area? What are the implications? So everything must be squeezed in this abstract. Then you see that I put here in italic what they say, that research questions may be presented towards the end of the introduction, but it's not the case. Like, it may be in some cases, but from my experience from these good journals, they always like to put specific research questions at the end of the theoretical review. Well, maybe you can read the rest of it yourself, and I will comment on it later. Right, maybe 1, 2, 3, 4. Point 4. There is a scholarly review of relevant literature leading to a clear conceptual framework, and the unique contribution to knowledge in the field of the studies should be clear. So you must say to the reader why it is worth he or she should proceed with reading your paper. So in the literature review, you will say, this is what is known, but there is this gap. There is this research gap, and this is what I am trying to fill. And that is why my research questions look like this. So you must really, so don't expect that the reviewer will find what you are trying to achieve, what research gap you are trying to fill, himself or herself. Do it for him. It's always good if you write it in open. And then there's the methodology. That's clear what you should have there. And there's the discussion. We will come back to it later. So this is the chapter 20 by Lilia Dahl. And you see that he's the chief editor of the International Journal of Science and Mathematical Education. This is the journal published by Springer, a very good journal. So it's good that he provided a lot of information about it. For each part of the paper, he provides, I don't know, 2 pages. So I'm not going to go over everything. I would like you to read it. When you write an article, read it and think about it in terms of your own paper. And the same applies for the papers in Czech. Even if you write in Czech for Scientia and Educazione, for example, or for Pedagogica or any other journal, it has the same structure. If you are writing about empirical studies, of course, you can write a theoretical paper, but all the PhD students are expected to write a paper about their empirical research. So that's why I am talking about it. So you will see that they put all the parts of the journal articles and the thesis as well, and they say what you should do, or he says, say what you should do, what you should concentrate on. And he also has such a nice picture here, which I wanted to present. Because if you look on the right, there is the answer research question. So you say what your research question is, then you answer it, but of course you can have other results as well. Something happened during the data analysis, you found some other ideas, of course you can put it there as well. And each part of this answer to your research question should be related to literature. So you find some result, you have some finding. So let's see if others find the same finding as well. And you connect it to it. Or maybe you disagree with their findings. Your findings are different. So then you put it there as well. You shouldn't just ignore it. You put it there and you try to explain why they got a different result. The explanation might be simple. It might be that they have a different group of students or a different context or whatever. So it doesn't have to be a disadvantage of your work that you found a different result. Be very careful. It often happens, in my experience as a reviewer, that they only artificially read the results of some other paper and say, oh, it's the same result, so they may mention it. And if I or the other reviewer happen to know the article, and some reviewers even go and read the articles, we may find that, of course, that the results are the same, but the population is totally different. So, for example, Chandresa is working with grade 8 pupils, and she would relate it to the students who are 7 years old. Yes, in some cases you can do it, but you must be open. So you might say, there is no research, as far as I can say, about grade 8 pupils or lower secondary pupils, but we can find some research related to younger pupils, and then you can relate somehow, but be open about it. The same applies for the review literature review at the beginning. It very often happens when I read it, and even in your theoretical parts for your thesis, that you speak about literature, but you do not say whether the literature is related to the same age or roughly the same age of pupils. So, for example, you might be working with future teachers, but in literature review, you mention results of works with elementary pupils. You can do that in some cases, but you must be open about it. You might say, well, even pre-service teachers do not know this, what the elementary pupils don't know, or whatever, you know. But you must be very open. Also, you should be open about the geographical area. Today we heard that in Ghana the situation is totally different. So if we want to relate some research results to Ghana, we should say Ghanaian pupils, because it's very far away from us. So it's good to provide information, even in the literature review and in the discussion, whether these are pupils or participants, which can be very well related to your participants, or whether they are someone else. So this all should be written here, there. Also, you should be aware how strong the finding of the other study is. So, for example, you want to add that I don't know, pupils were afraid of this particular problem or something like that, and you found the same result, so you are happy, and you say, well, Chandresa's results are the same. But then we look into Chandresa's results and we find out there were 3 pupils. Okay, so you must be careful. You can use it. It's not a problem, but be open about it. In a case study with 3 pupils, Chandresa found out. So when I read literature review and when I read the discussion, especially for the strong claims, if it is something unimportant, I don't care. But if it is a strong claim, then I sometimes open the other article and try to see how strong it is really. So be careful about it, especially when you make some notes from literature. You should make such notes as well. And of course, we haven't spoken about the quality of literature you are using. Those who attend my class, they know that I prohibited conference proceedings for the time being, because the conference proceedings come after only later, because big ideas are not published in conference proceedings. In conference proceedings, there are usually smaller studies, and many of them are later published in good journals. So if you find a proceeding somewhere, try to see whether the authors publish something bigger in a good journal. And also be very careful about the choice of journals. I have spoken about it with Jakub, for example, that AI nowadays can bring you many papers. And you know that they can, sometimes they are non-existent, but there are some illicit rabbit or something like that, which bring you existing results. But so far, it cannot say how important it is. So it brings you, when I tried it several times, it brings you many papers from Indonesia or somewhere, because they have thousands of journals. And then a good journal, which is the basic one, is somewhere at the end. So be careful about it. I would like you to first really look into the databases, look into the journals which are on our website. These are the most important journals in our area, and you should start with them. And then they can widen. When you know who the main authors are, then you can widen. Because it sometimes happens that you quote some important idea, which was, I don't know, made by Gray and Toll, and you, or not you, but this person allocates to some person in Asia, which you used it as an afterwards. So be careful about that. So because then you lose a lot of time trying to sift through hundreds of articles. If it had been enough for you to look into these main journals and to select the relevant information. So you see that the discussion can be broader. You can see it from this diagram. And then you answer the research question and it comes to the conclusion. The conclusion says it again, but very briefly. This is I only wanted to show you that they also speak about common errors made. For example, this is for the methodology part, and then the results part. The most frequent problem is that you present a lot of data, you present all your data, but then you only draw some conclusions based on some data. We saw an example on the first day here because the presenter presented all the data and then she spoke about 3 individual pupils, right? So you should be careful about that. Only present the data from which you draw the results. It seems such a trivial suggestion, but you would be surprised how many times this is not done. And another common mistake is when you present the data and then you present the results and they are not grounded in, some of them are not grounded in the data. You cannot, if you write findings, you cannot write anything which is not already present in the data. So you cannot add, and how the interviews showed, this was confirmed, but we haven't heard about interviews before that. Yeah, so if it is not in the data, you cannot mention it in the findings. Maybe as a footnote saying some, and I did later some interviews and, you know, but it's not important because it's just at some context, which is not a valid result. Then there's a picture, chapter 17 by Helen Fergus, and she actually brings a lot of very good suggestions for writing as such. And this would be, from now on, an compulsory reading for my course, Math Education 1, because it says not only the structure of the paper, but also some tips for writing literature review, for example here, or how to write quotations, because these are the questions I have to answer all the time, and it's everything is here, how you quote using APA. Only that in this book, as it was published in 2007, no, maybe later, but it's older now, it works with APA 6, but now we have APA 7. APA 7 is a little bit easier, more simpler. So you can just see how it changed from APA 6. But otherwise, there are the basic rules. Of course, these are the rules which, if you don't obey them, it doesn't mean that they would refuse straight away, but they will force you to do it anyway. So it's good to start writing in APA 7 from the beginning. Even the Czech journals, pedagogical journals, and Scientia and Educación as well, use APA 7. Yeah, so if you are writing already APA 7 in your thesis, then you are set. Of course, there are some obscure journals which might use something else, but they are not frequent. The most journals would use upper 7. All right, where we are. Okay, you see that there are tips like that. For example, how to paraphrase others' words. So if you, it's a bad strategy to use a lot of direct quotes. So of course, literature review is about quoting all the time. But some of the, or most of the things should be paraphrased. And this is, she's trying to give you some tips how to paraphrase. There are also some tasks for the reader to try, and with answers. Right, and now these are the 2 papers which I wanted to look at. So I will open it here. I try to find an open access one so that you don't have to, yeah, okay, here it is. Right, so if you look at the abstract, even if you don't read it, so it is start with some claim. So we know that then we have the aim of the study, including the participants. In this way, these were because these are not participants as such, but participants are examples of difficulties. So the numbers of participants are already in the abstract. Abstract should say whether it is quantitative or qualitative, or whether it is mixed. And then it even says the results. What is the main result? And the last sentence is about the future. What implications there are. So actually the abstract is the article itself. The abstract is very important because it says to the reader, but also to the reviewer, what he or she should think about it. Yeah, if the reader, if the author already here says, and this is new, and this is how I think should do it and should be it in the future, then it gives a message. If you are unsure what is new in your study, the reviewer won't care about it. They would just say, and I do the same, so I don't know what is new about it. I knew of all of these things, and the author didn't say what was new, what research gap he or she closed. So here we have introduction. You can see that you have some quotes already here, like not quotes, but literature. And it should finish with what you are doing to do in the study. This literature is rather short. Sometimes it is a little bit longer. It's about 1 page, let's say. And in short, it presents what kind of literature you are using already here, how you are going to do it, and what you are going to do it. And then comes the literature review, and what you wrote in the introduction is going to be expanded. So it's like a small literature review, and then it is going to be expanded. So it shouldn't be something completely else. It's again a longer version of the abstract, but without the results. The results are not here. It only presents what the main issue is you are trying to solve, what we know about it from literature, and what exactly you are going to do. And then comes to literature review, which in this case, sometimes it is called theoretical background or literature review. It can be called differently. And if you think about your research, it should include all the concepts you are using in your research somehow. And it's very good to have subsections, and it's always very advisable to have subsections. It's good for your writing because it means that you stick to the point, but it's also good for the reviewer. So here we know they are going to speak about mathematical problems, reasoning, and learning, and nothing else should be done, only this. And they shouldn't revisit these problems later. So you put it there, you describe it, and you don't come back to it. So you can see that there are not a lot of quotes, and it's always good if there are not a lot of quotes. Direct quotes are important if you speak about the definition of a concept, for example, or if you want to quote their finding, one particular finding, but otherwise paraphrasing is better. Yeah, so then we have students' difficulties during problem solving. So this was mathematics and problem solving as such. Here they say what we know about students' difficulties during problem solving. What teacher can do. So you can see that these two aspects are clearly distinguished. Pupils and teachers, not pupils and teachers together. Sometimes when I read the literature review, especially the first attempts during the course, I get this idea that everything is put together. Then this is about further education, and then a special section or a subsection. It could have been not 3, it could have been 2.5. It doesn't matter if it is inside or outside. And it specifically aims, again, reiterates what gap they are going to close, what gap they identified, and what their research questions are. So here are 3 research questions, and then comes methods, which is usually called methodology, but it can be called method as well. And then, of course, it doesn't have to be the same for all the studies because you have different methodologies, so it doesn't have to be like that. Data collection and analysis with examples. So already here you put examples of the data, and then coding, because each of you will have some kind of coding, so you must clearly describe what the coding was, what coding framework you developed, and again it differs for papers. So all of this is about coding, and then comes the result. The results are best done according to the research question, again, because it helps the reviewer and also the reader. So you have the research question, so then you put research question 1 and then answer it with the data. And this description of the results should be quite objective, like you don't interpret, you don't discuss, you just say what the results are, what the numbers are, what concepts appear, what phenomena appear. But you don't say much about it. This seems that, because this will be done later in the discussion. Yeah. So here you see that the results are quite short. But of course there should be examples. Provide really good examples because they add credibility to your research, because they show that you coded well and that the coherence of the research is not bad. And then we have discussion. Discussion is sometimes also includes subsections. It depends. I would use subsections. Maybe they didn't. It doesn't really matter. And see, they have a special section what their contribution is. It's not usual. You don't have to do it, but they try to show what research gap they closed. So for the discussion, each important result which you found and which you can relate to, you should discuss within other results. You say it again, you answer the research questions again. Say, I found this, and this is in line with what Chandresa found, right? Or things like that, or it is against it. And you try to explain, and this is where you should explain and justify as much as possible. If we are unable to say the reason why something happened, provide several interpretations, because it's normal that you don't know how to interpret it. So use several interpretations. If you don't do it, the reviewer will do it for you, and that is bad. And of course, there should be a section on limitations. What limits your research results? And it's good to list all the limitations you can think of. It's always good to say openly, and try to reason why. So this is the limitation. So for example, David will have a limitation that some teacher didn't collect these data because, so explain why it happened. Maybe the limitation is such that you cannot do much about it, that nobody can do much about it. It's always good to look at the literature, which is very closely connected to your research, and see what kind of limitations they say. Maybe you can repeat it, you can say the same, but you shouldn't omit it, it must be there. And of course you can say future research, you can say some implications which are not here, and then come the references. And references again should be formatted according to APA 7. It's a formal thing, but be very careful about it. This is something which the reviewers don't like at all. If they found that your literature is not well done, that sometimes it is impossible to distinguish, is it a journal article, is it a book? This is something which will be frowned upon, because it will cause these busy people to write many more things to your article than you would like to. So be very careful, because you must be, it also shows that you are aware of the time and effort the other people will put to your work free of charge. They do it in their free time, you know, so it's always a good thing to show that you value the time. If I get a paper which is full of mistakes, full of typographical mistakes, full of mistakes in the literature, I sometimes say, no, I'm not going to read it, because this person didn't make much effort to do it. Of course, there will always be some mistakes in it. It's impossible to do it without mistakes, but be very careful before you submit. It's really a way of showing I value your time. Right, I'm not going to look at the other article because it would be the same thing, but I wanted you to be aware that each article has this structure. So when you write or when you study the articles, you can also pay attention to these aspects. So how do they write it? But of course, use the good example from good journals, not from the journals which are not in any good database, or it's not an argument if you say I found that in this article it is like that and you want me to change it. Yeah, so it's you never argue with the editors, never, even if you think that this person is an idiot, but you always say thank you for your comments, I will try to elaborate. If you disagree gracefully, like say I value the comments, but for my research this is not really appropriate because. So try to really do it in a neutral way, even though sometimes the reviewers' comments can be quite harsh, right? But you always accept it. But of course, we can speak about the reviews some other time. So what I wanted to convey is that you should read this compendium, or at least part of it, about writing when you try writing the paper, and do it as they say, because they know what they are doing. These are the people from the best journals, and if you do it, then half of the success is here, and the other half is, of course, that you conducted your research well enough. Yeah, so that's it. Thank you very much. I don't know if you have any time for discussion or not.
10 minutes. Maybe.
10 minutes, okay. So, Gabriela?
Thank you for the source where you were showing the how to use APA. And my question is, do you have any source like that in Czech? Because I was thinking about our bachelor students who have no idea how to paraphrase, how to do citations.
No.
Nothing.
No, I don't, but there must be some. I think that there must be some courses for students how to write. But of course, there are different rules for different subjects. So maybe they use a different for norm than APA.
Yeah. And my second point is not really a question, maybe a dark side aspect of our education, Because recently I started writing the article for what is the Mathematic conference proceeding. And for the first time in my life, I'm not writing a research article. I have no data. I'm writing a theoretical article. And I'm really fighting with myself because you were my supervisor, so this structure was emphasized to me quite a lot.
Yeah.
And the theoretical article doesn't have it like this. And
no, but you can look at the website of Scientia ed Educazione because there's a paragraph about theoretical paper, because there are no strict rules for a theoretical paper. The only thing which is important is that you really justify all the claims and you show that you are elaborating on the relevant literature. I haven't written any, we have written with Martina Šmejková about jazyková gramotnost, so maybe you can have a look at it, but otherwise there are no strict rules. Chandra?
Yes, I wanted to ask something about the discussion part. I read some articles that they include again the research question there, and they discuss again.
Yeah, it is possible. It is possible to, the discussion can revisit the research questions, say what you found out, and what you found out relate to what is known in other literature. Maybe I can mention the thing which we discussed about including new literature for the discussion section. It is possible. You can have the theoretical framework and literature review from what you stem your research, but then you find new articles which you can also augment. You can put it to the front as well, but sometimes it's not so important, so you can include it at the end. So it doesn't have to be already in the literature review. It can come afterwards, because maybe you found it later, or maybe you only want to mention it in relation to some aspect of your results, which are not part of the main part, of the main thing.
I'm a little bit confused about discussion and conclusion difference, because, for example, this article doesn't have it, and quite often it is one chapter.
Yeah. It depends on the journal. Usually there is a conclusion, and conclusion is like you have findings. From the findings, you answer research questions in the discussion, and you make it like that, and then you take the discussion again, but without new literature. There's no literature in the conclusion. In the conclusion, you say briefly again, answer the research questions, what you found out, what it means, and what is the main message. So these things. But again, look into this compendium, because it speaks about conclusion specifically. And I'm quite surprised that there is no conclusion, because usually there is a conclusion. Conclusion is important because, again, you say again, and this is the importance of my study. And if you say, even though the reader says, well, it's strange, but but he thinks so, it's good. It's a good way towards being accepted. Yes.
So there, in the conclusion, there can be some suggestions to do more.
Yes, again, yes. How to proceed. Yes.
Not in discussion, but
in both. It can, in the discussion, you say, and the future of this is like this in relation to this, and you put some more literature. But at the end, you say, and more research is needed on the topic of this thing. Well, it's not good to say more research is needed on the topic, right, like this, because it's always like that. But you say more research is needed on this aspect of my work.
Yeah. So about the literature review, when I was in this, we had like 30 weeks, and they said that you always have to include like section, subject, what is your theory base, even if it's a qualitative research. So I read a lot of articles that they don't specify it very well.
No, I don't know what you mean.
What the theory your topic is based on. So you have to always include where is your.
Well, it's your research questions, and it doesn't matter whether they are qualitative or quantitative. Should always be based on some theory. But this is very fuzzy, because this theory can be sometimes it is clear if you have constructivistic way of learning, so this is your big theory, you speak about Piaget and things like that, but sometimes it is difficult to find such a theory. But for example, for word problem was, the theory was about the solving of word problems and how psychologists theorize how word problem solving is organized. So it should always be there. Yeah, it should always be there. But it might be difficult to find the theory. Actually, in the department we have a book which is called like important concept in math education, something like that. And this is what the authors agreed on are the big theories, or were the big theories at the time. So again, you can get help from the other articles of the same thing. None of you does something which is very new, right? You build on thousands of articles, some of which you will use. So see what theory they are using, learn from them. What is behind it? Because sometimes we do not speak about the theory which is behind it because it's somewhere in our mind and we are not aware of it. So try to learn from the articles as well, what they include as a theory. When of course then the reviewer will read it and then he will say, but this theory is missing. So we'll go and you will find this theory. Oh, I apologize, but I augmented this theory. So the reviewer sometimes help you with finding the good theory if he or she feels that your work is good enough to be augmented. Or sometimes you can say, for example, in our case, we would say we are using the theory of generic models because this is the theory which is most used in our area, and you will liken it to Appel's theory and other theories, but you can stick to our local theory. But you just explain what it is and how it is related to what is known more widely. There is a big problem if you write a theory, but you do not use it. It's bad, yeah? So your theoretical part or your practical part must be connected. So you must really write it with understanding. Sometimes we can see that the theory is there just because you think it must be there, but then we cannot see there or in the practical part, or it is used in a totally different way than previously seen. So everything should be connected. Both the article and your thesis should be very compact. So everything should be closely related. And whenever you write your results and you find a different concept, see, did I speak about the concept earlier or not? If not, you must include it there. It just can't appear suddenly in your discussion. Okay? Yes, so the last one.
I was also wondering how much you should change your writing style based on the publication venue. Because if you're writing a really proper scientific article for Q1 or something, of course you're using those posh phrases and everything. But if you're writing a conference paper for teachers and you want them to read it, of course, yes, of course, for the proceedings for teachers, you use as few concepts as possible. Something which is understandable to them because no one would read it. So it's a different venue. What I'm talking about is your thesis or the journal articles for professionals. But still, if you want to present some data, some research you have, you should keep the structure. You should keep the structure, yes. Even for Uchitel Mathematiky, for example, for the journal, you should keep the structure. In a more human, real friendly way. Yes, that's right, yeah. So you don't have to say too many details because they will not care. But for the journal articles, you must include as much detail as possible so that this person believes that you did it. Yeah, so if you say I analyzed the data, I coded the data, you must provide examples of this coding. Even though we cannot be 100% sure that you did it, but at least you present it in such a way that we can believe it, that you thought about it. If it is not present, then nobody will take your results for granted. So the analysis of data should be really properly described.
because sometimes I have to write, I don't know whether I can believe the findings because I don't know anything about the data analysis. And that's bad. Nobody is going to accept such a paper. And also there is this great discussion and great tendency towards making the data public so that the others can show them and use them. So we are now in the process of change. Okay, so I think that it's time for lunch. Thank you very much.